I'm Chelsea. I'll be your Q&A moderator for today's session, and I am very honored to introduce Dr. Norma Hernandez. Sorry for my stumbling. Dr. Hernandez's work focuses on the effects of material hardship and persistence and academic achievement for community college students. At ASU, she worked with community partners to creatively access resources for those students in greatest need of food, housing, and cash assistance. And so, Dr. Hernandez, I will hand it over to you. One housekeeping note is we do have a Q&A box. Dr. Hernandez will be taking questions periodically throughout and at the end of the session, so please throw your questions in there, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as possible.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. Appreciate the introduction and all the assistance from Coursera to make this happen. So I'm Norma Hernandez. I'm currently a faculty member both at Arizona State University in the psychology department and also at Norco College, which is part of the Riverside Community College District. I've been in the community college system for about 8 years and also worked at higher graduate level institution, Claremont Graduate University, taught a year at Harvard Graduate School of Education, did some work at UCLA, and taught at some traditional undergrad, 4-year undergraduate institutions. So I've kind of been in a variety of institutions, which has given me a lot of insight into student learning experiences and the type of experiences that we want our students to have. Part of my thinking in terms of this session was about how do we move students from this kind of transactional type of learning to transformational learning? So I'm going to kind of go through what that means, but I want to share a little bit of my story because part of my story was moving from this transactional to a transformational type of learning. This is my story. I'm a daughter of immigrants. So on the left are my maternal grandparents, and my parents are in the middle. They immigrated from Mexico back in 1968 with the hopes of better educational opportunities for their children. They lived in a border town right across the border from California in Mexico. And there wasn't a lot of opportunity if you didn't come from a middle income or high income family in order to attend the university. There wasn't necessarily financial aid assistance available. And so my parents came with the dream that their children would have access to higher education. So we're children of immigrants, and with that comes an enormous amount of hope that you can traverse all of the barriers that exist in order to be successful. And on the right is a picture of my family from many years ago when my brother graduated from college. I have one brother and I have 3 sisters, so there's 5 kids in total, and I'm happy to report that all of us graduated with their BA, and we have 2 of us with a doctorate, one with a law degree, one with the master's in public policy. Interestingly enough, it was all the girls who got the advanced degrees. My brother is an engineer by training, and my sisters and I actually most recently started a company, Sisterhood for Equity, where we do consulting work, research and evaluation, and other work along those lines that's equity centered. And part of the impetus or the motivation for us to go to college was to make more money. And we're not alone in that respect, in that many students come to college. Why? Because you want to make more money. And you have probably seen this statistic somewhere. In their lifetime, a college graduate will make on average over $1 million more than someone with a high school diploma. This statistic is actually a little misleading because it's actually someone with a 4-year degree as opposed to someone with a 2-year degree. And if you look at the numbers put out by the National Center for Education Statistics or other organizations, this number can waver, but over a lifetime, you'll make more money. My story includes that when we were young, my father used to work for the General Motors. He got hurt. And so part of what we had to do as a family is to come together to try to make more money in order to not be kicked out of our house, basically, not be out on the street. And so part of our journey included taking on a lot of jobs as a family. So that included cleaning houses. I used to clean houses with my mom when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Starting at 4 or 5 years old, we used to have a paper route. We worked at the swap meet for many, many years in order to keep our family afloat. And so for us, the decision to do well in school And regardless of the obstacles that were there, was not a difficult one because we knew what it was like to work with our hands. We knew what it was like to face difficult economic circumstances. And we knew that that was not something that we wanted to do as adults. And we had this opportunity, again, despite the obstacles that were there, to go to college, to do well. And so for us, we saw college as very much a transactional type of experience. We've actually, my siblings and I have written about this. It's a piece in the Harvard Educational Review that is used by some four-year institutions to help students understand what their own journey is and to see if it's similar, if they relate, because my siblings and I all had different types of journeys, believe it or not. Here are the reasons why the majority of students say they want to go to college, and parents will say the same thing. You make more money, right? $1 million over a lifetime. You're going to have better career options. So when you look at unemployment rates, they're much lower if you have higher degrees as opposed to if you have a high school diploma or less than a high school diploma. You gain crucial decision-making skills. You make more connections. Those connections lead to a wider network. You have a wider network, then that leads to more job opportunities or different types of job opportunities. You enjoy a higher standard of living, and your children will be more likely to go to college. So recent surveys show, the last 25, 30 years I've been studying this, 99% of parents want their children to go to college. 99% of parents want their children to go to college for a variety of reasons, which include making more money. I see this as being a very transactional type of reason to go to college, because you're saying, hey, if I put in this work, I get my certificate at the end, I'm going to have access to a better job because it requires me to have a better job. And what I am lobbying for is a transformational type of experience. And there's actually not a lot written in terms of transactional versus transformational types of educational experiences. If you know the field on transformational type of learning, there is such a thing called transformational leadership, right? So when I pulled this, comparing transactional versus transformational leadership. So when people look at in higher education, you'll see them talk about transformational leadership, constantly seeking to improve the organizational structure, promote innovative ideas, solve problems. This kind of very much centered on a growth mindset, right? How are we proactive? How do we constantly infuse organizations with new ideas, as opposed to transactional leadership, where you're trying to maintain the status quo. The objectives are achieved through a reward punishment system. Leadership is responsive as opposed to being proactive. And what I have learned in my 20 plus years of being an educator in classrooms in higher ed, I also was a former middle school teacher and taught elementary school, is that the types of experiences that we're really hoping for as educators is for students to have transformational types of experiences, where you come out of that experience and it's really moved you in terms of changing your perspective about this world or that particular organization that you're working in. And I want to give some example of this difference between transactional and transformational, but I did see a couple of questions that pop up. So I want to stop here, Chelsea, to see if there's some questions that popped up.
Sorry, I muted myself. Just one quick question is, will you be sharing the materials after the session?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to share the materials. So I want to give you some examples of this kind of transformative experiences. The transactional type of experience is along the lines, give me my certificate, I gain so many credits, 60 credits, I get my 120 credits, I get my BA, give me my certificate, I move on, and that's it. And I've been working in colleges in the last few years where that's very much the case. And even at the undergraduate and sometimes at the graduate level, that's what you get. People just say, give me my certificate, I need a badge, I need something checked off to say that I did this, and we're ready to go. The type of transformative experiences that we want for our students are the kind that really move you in a certain way. I'm going to start with the picture on the lower left. So the picture on the lower left is I'm actually there, squatting there on the bottom left, is an experience that I had at one point in my life. I wanted to be a missionary. I attended Christian schools. I went to a Christian college, and I thought I wanted to be a missionary until I actually did missionary work. And I said, no, this is not for me. So it kind of changed my life trajectory and did missionary work in Latin America and several Latin American countries, working with some indigenous groups, and really had to rethink about, should we have missionaries or not, and the type of missionary work that we were doing, and were we really doing good in this world or not? That's a whole topic for, another conversation, but it was transformative in that I got to experience what it was like for people to live in poverty in other countries outside of the United States, even though I had seen it through my own parents' experiences through pictures. But the lived experience was a very different type of experience, and trying to understand what that means, which led me down a path of trying to understand, how does American public policy and the history of that influence the status quo that we see in certain Latin American countries, and begin to question that. And so that was a type of transformative experience that I had. The picture on the right is actually, some of you may have seen that picture. That happened a couple of years ago when we had this mass migration, especially of children from Latin America. And cities were debating whether they should be sanctuary cities or not. And people were lobbying the city councils whether they should be or not. So the young man on the right is actually my nephew. This picture did go viral as he went to a city council meeting in his hometown, Simi Valley, California. And he had this woman yell at him because he stood up and said his opinion about what he thought his city, if they were a caring city, it should be a sanctuary city. And she yelled at him some not so very nice words and related to his ethnicity. And this picture was actually the impetus for my sister, who's actually in the background in the white shirt, for her to run for city council, because she said, we have to do something different. This is not okay. And she is actually now running for Congress. Her transformative experience, and she's had many in her life, but one of the was this is, how can we as a community come together to address the social issues that are before us? And certainly we can do better than yelling at, I think my nephew was 15 at the time or 14 at the time. And so now she's running for Congress. The two pictures on the top are pictures of my students. I was a former PTK, Phi Theta Kappa advisor. PTK is an honors organization for 2-year colleges. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization that really, I think, provides the types of experience for students to have transformative experiences. So we have retreats, we have overnight retreats, we used to attend conferences, they have a whole nerd nation that students can go for those types of experiences as well. If you don't do it within your own organization, you work on different projects. And for me was really key example of how can we provide the types of experiences in students who are in a commuter campus, as many of our community college students are, in order to have deeper, richer, meaningful experience and engage in the type of networking that allows them to be successful later on, the type of networking that college experiences are supposed to have. And when you're at a 2-year institution and move on quickly, that maybe you don't necessarily have. And on the right are 3 of my students and a colleague of mine. So 3 of those students we got to take to Harvard University, and that was a transformative experience to them, for them to present their work there. The young woman on the right with the long hair, she had decided that initially she was going to be a nurse, and after that experience said, what I've really always wanted to be is a medical doctor. I'm going to go to medical school. This is what I want to do. And she's on her journey of trying to fulfill the prerequisites to get into medical school. It was a transformative experience for the students in a way that never really imagined. The young girl with the white sweater, she had never flown on a plane before, had never been outside of Arizona, had never experienced what life was like in a different city for a variety of reasons, most of them having to do with financial constraints. And that was a transformative experience. And I'm not lobbying that, you need to travel outside of your home state or outside of your country. I think it's wonderful if you do, but I think we can think about how institutions can foster that type of learning experiences for students that go beyond just regurgitating the material, taking tests, maybe writing a term paper, but that really helps them change their viewpoint in a way that they want to be agents of social change. I'm going to go as far as to say that they want to be in the service of others and what that means to them. And it's in having these types of relationships and having these types of classroom experiences, of college, university experiences, that I think transform individuals in that way, and in a way can transform communities as well, because they take that energy out with them. They take that hopefulness out with them that, hey, we can do something different, in the way that my sister is running for Congress now, or that we have young people engaging in activities that really can make a difference in their community. I saw a hand up, so I don't know if I need to stop for a hand up.
We do have a couple questions that I think are probably really pertinent to what you were just sharing.
Yeah.
So Cherry Carter added a few, which I apologize if I'm doing this incorrectly, Cherry. I'm going to summarize is, does transformational leadership consider cultural differences? Specifically, she adds in, what does this mean living, or, addresses living in a capitalist society, and then the cultural differences between Eastern and Western ideologies.
Yeah, the literature on transformational leadership, it's interesting you mentioned that, because my husband is in the process right now of finishing up his dissertation. He's writing about this. How does culture play a role? One of the things that transformational leaders do is they're constantly trying to seek ways to integrate other knowledge that hasn't been the status quo. So his work, it is interesting. It's very relevant, because his work has focused on, should leaders at Hispanic serving institutions, does that leadership look different than at non-Hispanic serving institutions? And I would ask the same about, minority serving institutions or not. Do we take culture into account? Do we take different types of frameworks into account? And I think the transformational leadership literature would say, yes, you would definitely take those things into account. We're in a place right now in our society where it's very difficult for us to talk about issues of racial discord, because they're happening. They've always happened. It's not they're only happening now, but we're beginning to open up this conversation. But we're also in a place in our society where people are really divided about that, and the assumptions that people make about what it means. Our whole conversation about, critical race theory. No, we shouldn't be critical about something. No, we should. What does that mean? What does that entail? So I think there's a lot of misinformation right now, and I think what has to happen in institutions is to have that dialogue, to not shy away from it, but to say, hey, let's tackle this head first, and let's see, what does that mean? What is transformational leadership? What does it look like? What does it entail? So I think that addresses the question. There's not a lot of work out right now in terms of how different cultural models influence that, and I think we're trying to move institutions in terms of being places of transformation rather than transactional. But I think we're kind of stuck right now, and hence why I wanted to tackle this topic in terms of that they are very transactional. I work with a lot of parents. I do a lot of community work, and most of the time parents, and I do have to say I work with first generation college students a lot too. I don't hear parents necessarily say, I want my students to go to college so that they can challenge our cultural assumptions. I want my students to go so that they can really, and I have my daughter sitting here to the right of me, so she's in my site. I want my daughter to go to college so she can really question whether things are equitable for her as a female in our culture. That usually doesn't come up. What happens is, I want my child to go to college so that they can make more money, so they can get a better job, so they can have a better life. And how people define what a better life is very different for different groups of people. For my husband and I have to share with you that a better life for our children means that you make the world better for other people, not just yourself, not just getting your second or third fridge in your basement, or whatever that entails, or being able to go to Disneyland every single summer, but making the world a better place. What does that mean? And I'm not dissing Disneyland by any means. I love Disneyland. I think it's a great place to go visit, but that the end all be all shouldn't just be about you. It should be about what is it that you're contributing to other individuals? How are you making our society better? Because I think one thing we can all agree on is that we need to make our society better so that it works for everyone and not just for a few. I see several hands that went up.
Yeah, we're getting quite a few questions. I do see a couple, I think a few addressing that you spoke of travel experiences when you were on this slide. So there's a question about funding for these activities, but then also in a world where travel is not realistic in a lot of cases in our current state of the world, how do we bring this into the online classroom?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because that's the challenges that we're having right now. And travel, again, doesn't necessarily mean that you travel to a different state, but what about traveling to a different part of your city, understanding the different places within your own hometown as well, because oftentimes we kind of stay to just our small circle of experience that we've had. We don't travel to different places. I have had the privilege of traveling across the country by car several times, and that's really illuminating along those lines. And I think this is where we need to be creative in terms of seeking funding for our students. I ran the honors program when I was a faculty member within the Maricopa Community College system. And I know that there was funding for students to have those types of experiences. I've seen people have their students engage in research projects that get them out of their comfort zones and travel to a certain extent, maybe on a different part of the campus that they hadn't, if you're on a very big campus, to talk to individuals that are different than them, to investigate a research question perhaps that they were interested in, that they gained insight that they would not have gained if they were reading it from a textbook. To have those kinds of lived experiences that I think really make a difference for students. One of the core components of an honors program is for students to engage in research. Why? Because we think that's valuable, because we know that it can be a type of transformative experience with I want to add, with the proper support, because travel in and of itself isn't transformative if you don't have the experiences for students to be able to digest what they experience, to be able to take it a step further. Then it just becomes a collage of pictures of where they traveled, but not really transformative in that way. So I want to make that distinction, that just travel in and of itself isn't necessarily a transformative experience. That's why you need people to guide students. You need people to guide them through that experience. You need to be able to debrief from the experience, to talk about what you saw, what did you see, what did you experience, how did that feel, how did that change your current mindset. Dr. Barbara Oakley talked this morning about schemas. How did that change your schemas of your worldview? Did it make it bigger? Did it challenge some things? Did it make you uncomfortable? Did it not make you uncomfortable? Why not? Those are the types of experiences that are spaces that we need to create conversations for our students, because that's what leads to that transformative experience. It's not just a travel in and of itself. It's about having this type of, and how can we do that? Now, we've opened up this whole door now because of COVID-19. And I would say one of the silver linings, if there's any at all, is the ability to connect with people nationally and internationally via Zoom in a way that we never were before. We invite people into our home. We invite people into our community digitally in a way that we never really explored before. It was very limited in that regard. And I think that's an opportunity to connect with people on a level that we didn't have before. And I think it's going to take creativity in order to do that, and a lot of scaffolding in order to be able to do that effectively. One of the mistakes sometimes people make when they want students to work in groups is they throw them into groups, get into a group, work together. Okay, that doesn't work well unless people have actual guidelines on how to work with a group. And then everybody hates work group because you didn't set up the right process, or you didn't have a learning mechanism to help students learn how to work in a group. Working in a group can be great or it can be disastrous depending on the type of support structures that you have in place. Let me see if there's another question. If not, I want to move on to the next one. I saw Gail had her hand up several times.
Yeah, there's several questions. Mike asking about, and I think you kind of addressed this. Mike, please feel free to add in follow-up questions. If not, can't reading a book or watching a movie be a transformational experience? Gail asked about virtual travel being transformative as well. I don't know if you want to add a couple thoughts there.
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, I think that you can do the virtual travel now. But again, I don't think it's just as simple as here, watch this video and let's go, or here, watch this movie and that's the end of it. I think, you know, one of the things I do as an instructor, I have guiding questions. I give a context as to why I'm showing a particular movie. I provide an opportunity for discussion afterwards. I provide maybe an opportunity for people to journal about it, or we have a discussion board. So it's that engagement with the material that can be transformative along those lines. You can have people go watch a movie, but it's entertaining for 2 hours and then that's it. But you never go beyond that. You don't provide a context for what you watch. Well, why was it important, or how was it relevant to your life or what you're doing? Then I think that's a missed opportunity in that regards. And I've been on campuses where people show a movie, but there's no discussion afterwards. It's kind of like, well, the students will go discuss it. Well, you don't create that space for them, not necessarily. And so I think those are missed opportunities. So if you're going to travel virtually, if you're going to connect people, I think you have to have the type of support structure for them to be able to engage with what that opportunity meant for them. And sometimes that happens, it's lagging in the sense that maybe it's so fresh in their mind that they need 2 weeks or they need a month or sometimes 3 months to think about the impact that experience really had to them. I've had students who have had those types of transformative experiences. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they traveled out of town. Maybe they went to go do a micro internship for 6 weeks somewhere, and that when they were doing it, they didn't think it was that special. But then afterwards, they said, you know what, I really learned a lot of that experience. That was incredible. And I think that's another opportunity that I think about is the internships for students to engage in. There are online internships that you can do. There are in-person internships, obviously. And the more support that you have, the more guidance you have for the student, I think the richer the experience can be in that regard. And so I think that's an opportunity for students to engage in as well. Chelsea, does that tackle the questions?
I think so. We do have a couple more, but I don't know if you want to get to the next section and then we can address more questions towards the end.
Okay, let me get to the next question, because I think this is the part that just for me, what does a caring framework look like? What does that look like in our higher ed institutions? I would argue it as well within K through 12, but particularly in higher ed institutions, what does the caring framework look like? I was on this massive job search in the last 2 and 3 years, and I read so many people's mission statement and values, and went through, about the organization. And I can tell you that there's not a single organization, and I applied to over 100 positions nationally. There's not a single institution that I encountered that didn't talk about providing the best opportunity for their students. And some of them talked about caring for them and we're going to take care of you, and kind of using that language. And I really had to kind of sit back and say, what does a caring framework look like? Is it simply, hey, you're going to get to meet with us one-on-one and that's it? And I would argue that it's much more than that. A caring framework involves a variety of components, okay? So caring framework, one, you have staff, you have leadership, a commitment to the type of experiences for students that are going to be transformational. I think there has to be an acknowledgement of that this is not just simply about getting a certificate or getting a badge or getting a degree for the sake of just receiving it. But what we want is students to be able to have the courage to be inspired, to dream beyond what they currently see. It is gaining a skill set but is beyond gaining the skill set. So how do we provide a caring framework? I think you have to formalize it. I see, institutions that have done that. You look at the work of Amarillo College and Russell Lowry Hart and the work that he's doing out there, some of the work that's done by the Hope Lab, where they have looked at organizations that formalize the caring framework, the caring network. So what does that mean? You don't just sit there on the first day of your professional development day and say, yes, we all care about students, but that there's actual training, there's actual accountability in terms of formalizing that caring network. So formalizing relationships, perhaps through a mentoring program, connecting a student to someone. For the last 9 years, 8-9 years, I've worked at a community college setting, which is so different than a 4-year institution, 4-year college or university, because these students are very community college students, for the most part, don't live on campus. We do have some exceptions, and I know some schools like Santa Rosa College that are building housing on campus, but they come to class, maybe attend one other event, and as soon as class is done, they leave, and that's it. And so you don't have that connection for students. And I think it's more challenging within 2-year institutions because students aren't living on campus. I think that's the challenge that we have to name. So how do we formalize the caring network? You empower individuals to be able to have that training, to be able to scaffold that caring for students. And again, that accountability piece. So it's not just simply saying to students, we care about you. It's about being an anchor for students so that they know, hey, that's my person. I can go to that person over there. That's who I'm connected to. And in some of the evaluation work that I've done with our organization Sisterhood for Equity, we find students that don't do well because they don't have an anchor. They don't have anyone they can connect to. And especially if you're a first generation college student, you can't necessarily go home and say, okay, I'm having an issue. How do I navigate the financial aid process? What does that look like? So who's your person at the college to serve as that anchor for you so that you can really live out what it means to be a caring institution and not just say it, right? Because actions speak much louder than words in that regard. So you have to organize around this caring framework. You have to train your faculty, staff, your employees on what that means. That means you're going to go the extra mile. That means that if you don't know the answer, you're going to say, I don't know the answer, but I can send you to somebody who does. And doing that extra piece of work really shows the student, man, I'm worthy enough that they're going to go ask them, they're going to take time out of the day to go ask someone to do that. I think caring inspires courage for students. Caring fuels resilience in that regard. But it's also an enormous amount of work. It really is. And the challenge is particularly for institutions where less than 50% of their faculty may be full-time, and you also have a transient faculty along those lines, is how do we provide that type of caring structure or anchors when we don't necessarily have faculty and staff that are here full-time. I think that's one of the challenges that leaders are really going to have to contend with in the future of how do you do this, and we're kind of having to meet it head on right now, given the low numbers of students who return back to the community colleges. I want to give some examples of I think the challenge is to create a constellation of caring relationships focused on helping. So in the middle of your screen is a former student of mine, and he's not smiling because he actually has a missing tooth. And this moped that he's working on was one of the, I think he said, the first new thing that he had ever owned. He was in the foster care program as a young person, and then his mother reclaimed him. I don't know if that's the correct terminology, when he was 17 years old. And that's important because that means that he didn't get the benefit of free tuition because he exited out of the foster program before he was 18. And so he was a student at our community college who was in a car accident, and his moped, which was a used moped, got totaled. And so along with some colleagues of mine, we raised funds in order to get him a brand new moped. And he went on to become went on to the nursing program and affect change for his community. And in part what he said is, I had people at my college who cared about me enough to buy me this, raise enough funds to buy me a moped. We actually also raised enough funds in order to buy him a new tooth, which is really, really great because it made a difference in terms of who was willing to hire him. Once he had a full smile, that's not the way that it should be, but that's the way that it was. My students on my left are Linda and Bill. They were won scholarships, full ride scholarships to the in Arizona through Phi Theta Kappa, and have been extremely active in terms of being leaders at Arizona State University. Both would be considered non-traditional students in that they're older. Linda is actually over 50 years of age. Her dream is to open up a clinic for a mental health clinic for individuals with trauma. And I know that she's going to do that. She's about to hopefully be accepted into a master's program soon and do that type of work. And on the right is one of my students who actually had dropped out of high school. She just received, in that picture, she's receiving her doctorate in pharmacy. She went on to get her doctorate. She's working now as a pharmacist. She came to the community college as a high school dropout with a child, unsure if she was going to be able to finish. And she is now helping other students, reaching back down to them, helping them and continuing that community of caring and what that means. And, so oftentimes we don't think about the work. How do you continue that from generation to generation? And one of the things that I say to my students all the time is, I want to make sure that you pay it forward. Whatever you do, I want to make sure that you pay it forward, that you pay it to other students. And how do we affect that change in order to expand that network? I found this quote in doing getting the work for this presentation. When someone's walking beside us, we have more courage to walk into the unknown and to risk the dark and messy places in our journey. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the success rate of students, first generation college students, low income students, who come to the college or the university. If you look at the differences between the success rate of those who attend community colleges versus a university, and there's a whole gap there that we need to address. But if you don't know the numbers, I can share with you that on average, if you attend a community college, more students are, depending on how you count the numbers, are unsuccessful than being successful. And how do we begin to change that? Because for many of those students, it's their last place of where they can find some hope in terms of getting into a different place in their lives. And I would say that we need to focus more on creating the types of institutions that can be transformative for individuals, and we can do that through a caring framework, so that it's not simply about getting a certificate. It's not simply about just coming to class, regurgitating the material, that they can be transformative in nature, so that we can have a type of society, type of community, type of country, I think, where we're caring for each other. And that might seem very kind of optimistic or hopeful, but I think we have the capacity to do that. But we need to provide the type of support structures for students to be able to lend that hand, to walk that journey with them, to be there for them. And, I have to say that sometimes that means just listening to them, to giving them that time to be able to be there with them, to be in that space, to let them know, I'm still here with you. I want to open it up to questions.
Yeah, I'm going to read Dr. Hernandez a few together, because I think they're all on this topic of caring, and hopefully we can address as much holistically as possible for people. So Dr. Joy Wilson commented, I believe that caring strengthens self-efficacy in students to encourage better performance. On one end of the spectrum, we have Scott Williams saying he's at a community college. We were told a couple of years ago we were adopting a culture of caring. It never went beyond the administration telling us this is what we're doing. And then on a question on the other extreme is, where do you stop between the caring framework and handholding? Is it only at the college level? Asking because I know students who have bulldozer parents and do everything for them and take advantage of that. And then
Go
one
ahead,
more
Chelsea.
comment
Yeah.
on surely no one can be paid to care. Can organizations care? Can people care? So a lot there, but people are very interested in this topic.
Yeah. And part of the work that my sisters and I do, and the work that we did this past year and working with community colleges and some of our equity work, one of the things we found was that there were instructors who said, I'm just going to pass the students. I'm just going to give them an A. They should have a pass. We shouldn't question it. They've had such a difficult time. I don't think that's the answer either. And that's really caring. I think it's warping it, perverting it in the way that, because I don't think it's caring when you give a student a grade that they didn't earn, because that sets them up for failure later on. Or when you give someone tenure that didn't earn it, or when you give someone a job that they didn't necessarily earn. I don't think I don't think that's caring. I think that's pity, to be very honest with you. And I don't think that's in the direction that we want to be heading to. In fact, some of the early work in the field of achievement and motivation is that when you pity individuals, they believe that you don't think that they have the capacity to do it. And that's why you gave them the pass. So I think we're setting ourselves up for greater failure by doing that. I think there has to be some type of ownership by the student. One of the things I often say to my students is, I can't do this for you. I would love to be able to do this for you, but I can't. You're the one who has to do it. You have to want it more than me. I can provide the support for you, but it's not me. I already went to college. I already went to graduate school. I already have a job. I'm doing what I love already, but it's really going to have to be you that has to do this. And those are difficult conversations to have for sure. But I think the option, the alternative to say, well, okay, well, you don't have to do that work, or you don't have to be held accountable for your actions. I don't think that that's a good alternative. I think one of the things that I've learned in my 50 plus years of life is that the stakes just get higher and higher and higher. And if you don't have integrity in your life, don't have integrity in the work that you do, it makes it easier later on to cross those lines, to cheat, to just tell a white lie, to go beyond that. So I think that we need to support students. I also know that students get a lot more satisfaction when they know that it's them, that they did that they did the work themselves, granted with the support of others, but that they themselves can take ownership and say, I did this. I have a lot of people to thank, but I got here not because somebody gave it to me, but because I earned it. That doesn't mean that we should intentionally put up barriers in order to have students go through that. I think, in fact, we have to take down barriers, but I think it has to be genuine type of learning for the students themselves to experience that. And I have seen that where students kind of bulldoze their parents. And I'm a parent with 3 kids. And, sometimes you have to say no. It's a no because it's a no. Because for these reasons, and I've tried to explain to you, but you may not understand them or you may not agree. And hopefully one day you'll see it from a different perspective. But for right now, this is the no, or these are the the hoops you have to jump through, not for the sake of jumping hoops, but this is why it's important. What we do has purpose, and this is why. I want to address the issue of, institutions, like I said, and the person who shared, we have a lot of institutions right now that are saying that they care, but really not necessarily in practice. How we determine, for example, when courses are being offered, how they're being offered. We have a big push right now for students to continue online learning. And the reason is not because they don't want to come to campus. 25% of our students in community colleges are parents. And if you haven't solved the daycare issue yet, then yes, as a parent, if I had young children that needed daycare, I don't see myself going to campus. It's not that I don't want to be on campus. I just don't see how I can do that if I have small children at home and what that means. And so we have a lot of challenges. I think we also have a lot of opportunities to be able to show that caring, but I think it has to be lived out. And it is frustrating having been at institutions. I'm not at one right now, but previously in Arizona, where people said, we do care. The administration said that, but their actions didn't lead to that. It wasn't really lived out in the way that they said that it was. There's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of taglines. There's a lot of poster boards that are put up, but the actions don't necessarily show that they're really doing that type of work. And I think that's where the accountability piece has to come in. And for many years, I've been lobbying, how do we use the accreditation agencies to be able to do that? I don't think there's a standard right now in terms of caring for students, but maybe there should be. How do institutions live that out, and that there has to be evidence provided for that?
We are just about a minute over. I do think this one question is probably an important closing thought for you to address. And before anyone hops off, a recording of this session will be shared out to all registrants for this event. So please keep an eye on your email. It'll be in the coming weeks. Thank you, Dr. Hernandez, for sharing your contact information. There's a lot going on in the chat. So kind of getting back to the students, I think this is probably a question on a lot of people's mind. There's obviously lots of institutional challenges, but the rewards for students are very transactional: grades, degrees, certificates. How do you convince students to think transformationally?
That's a really, really good question, because right now, I have a 10, a 14, and a 16-year-old. And if I said to my 10-year-old, okay, look, this is why I need you to do this. In my mind, it's a very kind of transformational thing I want him to do. But in his mind, he's just thinking, do I really have to do this? Do I have to? And I think actually one of the ways is to have those types of experiences for students in the K through 12 school setting. And I know some school districts that do just this. And I know some teachers who do that you can go back and say, my sister, the one who's running for Congress, actually, she's a teacher at an alternative high school, and she's always seeking out experiences for students that are transformational in that regard. She was able to get a grant to go see Hamilton for the students, and they had a whole curriculum based on this, and the tickets were free. And I'm like, wow, this is really amazing that she's able to lobby to spend time getting grants to be able to have transformative experiences for her students, and to be able to for the students to digest that information as well. So sometimes you don't have students who necessarily jump in and say, absolutely, I want to have this type of experience, but maybe it's through the transactional that leads to the transformational type of experience within institutions. And that's what I'm lobbying for, is that we create spaces in our institutions, whether that be through an honors program or a study abroad program or an internship program, or if you're an instructor, having a research paper as opposed to having assignments. And I know as an instructor, trust me, I know that's so much more work than having a test that they just do multiple choice and fill it out. But how do you create those types of experiences in your classroom that students come out of there? And I just was done with a research project interviewing students who had gone through statistics classes, and they statistics, and I teach statistics. It wasn't my class, it was at another community college. And they said, this has been the most amazing experience I've ever had. And I never thought that I would say that about statistics. And part of the curriculum, the transformative curriculum, was that they were working in groups. They had a shared final. Part of their final was doing that. The curriculum was relevant to what they were doing and who they are and their communities, and it had an impact on their communities. So I think you can do that within the classroom setting. I know you can do within institutions, and I think it's going to take leaders that are creative and passionate about creating those types of opportunities for students, that they are transformational leaders, not just transactional. And that's all makes sense. It's all related, because if you have leaders that are transformational, they want to create those spaces. for students. If you have leaders that are transactional, they're thinking about, where's my next step? Let me see, this is just a position that I'm getting so I can move on to the next step and the next step and the next step. I think we need to find a better way to ferret out who are those transformative leaders to be able to be in our institutions and be able to say, okay, this is simply transactional. You simply said we were going to care about the students, but that's not really what it meant. And that's where the accountability piece can come in terms of the accreditation agencies. But I think it's a really good question. And so what I would say is that sometimes the transformation doesn't happen until you, I guess, convince them first from a transactional perspective. Still, when I work with high school students, middle school students, and I go present in communities and to parents, the thing that most gets their attention about going to college is not the transformational part. This is a place to do the $1 million over a lifetime. And if I can convince them to take that first step, then they're on the journey. And if I can get them on the journey, then I know that I can get them to the transformative place.
Keep muting myself. Thank you so much, Dr. Hernandez. Thank you everyone who attended and hung in here with us. It's been a wonderful conversation. Again, you can see Dr. Hernandez's contact information on the screen. In the chat, I've shared links to additional sessions that will be going on this afternoon, and also a link to Dr. Hernandez's Course Hero profile, which has some content shared and an article that she wrote in partnership with our team. So thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. This was wonderful today.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank Chelsea and Navia and Irina and the Course Hero team who have been just so wonderful. And it's just a wonderful experience to be able to present with them and work with them. So thank you, thank you, thank you.